Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Karen. I'm your host today for Nights of the Storm. Today is Saturday, February 28th, 2026. It's a bit of a strange day because we are bombing Iran. So there's a lot of distraction and worry about that, but we're going to have a great time here today and also hopefully touch on some interesting and important topics. I have my co-host Ashley with me. Great to see you, Ashley.
Hey, it's great to see you too. Great to see Derek. Happy to be here.
Yes. And hello to everybody in the chat. And we have with us today our friend Bronx Stomper. We know him as Bronx Stomper. And this is Derek Lawson. It's great to see you, Derek. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
So today we're going to talk about agriculture, glyphosate. There's a big controversy with an executive order to give glyphosate or Roundup immunity similar to that of the 1986 Vaccine Immunity Act. And there's a lot of controversy. A lot of people have been covering glyphosate. And Derek has real world experience on a farm that switched from glyphosate to no chemicals or chemicals to no chemicals or to a more regenerative model cold turkey. So he has some great information about that. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background, Derek?
Yeah, so I grew up pretty much, involved in conventional agriculture. Got to college right when the university was transitioning from a dairy to a beef cow operation. I was on the ground floor of getting into that grazing in the early 2000s, that kind of grazing revolution that happened. And being a university farm, we had all kinds of test plots and, chemical companies and different stuff like that that were renting plots and doing research, so I was involved in that. And then later on, I ended up taking this job managing the farm where I'm at now, who for well over 30 years was a conventional row crop operation that when it transitioned ownership to a new generation, they decided that they wanted to create a biodynamic farm, a regenerative farm, and kind of heal all the damage that had been done to this land over 30 years. And they did a cold turkey switch from organic into planting grass and putting up fence and bringing cows in. And I kind of came in, let's see, they started in 2006 and I came in 2011. So 5 years in, and then really they were still in their infancy. They didn't really have a true manager before that that could be on the ground and had the experience grazing and different stuff like I did. And then we've just kind of built on that. I've been here for 15 years now, so. I don't know what happened. I can't hear anything that you said, Karen.
I didn't unmute myself. I'm sorry. I'm going to show a couple of clips about a couple of different sides of glyphosate, and then we'll talk about some of the issues and benefits and the many facets of the debate, whether we need these chemicals or we don't. So if we could share my screen, I have 2 clips to show.
I'm sorry I got lost in my tabs. I was searching for
okay.
StreamYard.
Okay, so this is a clip of RFK Jr., who was just on Theo Vaughn's podcast. And he went through quite a long explanation of his involvement with glyphosate and exposing that it does cause cancer, winning several judgments in big court cases. RFK Jr. was the lead in those cases, and he knows very, very well the harms that it can cause. But at this point, he's backing President Trump's position by saying that basically farming is addicted to glyphosate, that it has to be used, that if we stop using it cold turkey, we'll have a food shortage. So he's taking he's taking that stance, which other people seem to think is just ridiculous, or that we've been growing food for thousands of years without these chemicals. So this is a clip from Theo Vaughn's podcast recently with RFK Jr. And let me make sure I've got the volume on.
Diseases and sickness in people, right? About this glyphosate, I think it's called. Yeah, glyphosate. There's been a ton of lawsuits, but they still have to take this product off of the shelf.
We lost sound, Karen.
Dependent on it right now. And there's other technology that is emerging right now.
Okay, so I muted myself and then I lost sound.
Well, it sounded like it turned off for a moment and then it came back and it's kind of low. So I don't know if you can bring up that video volume at all or if Jason can help us with that.
Can you hear it now?
But they still have to take this product off of the shelf. So that's the craziest thing to me. Is that right? Well, it's a problem because you have all of the row croppers are dependent on it right now. And there's other technology that is emerging right now that actually, I looked at one yesterday. It's a tractor attachment that uses lasers to kill weeds. And that, if they can make that affordable, particularly for smaller farmers, that will be the answer because you'll be able to, they can kill bugs and they can kill weeds. You program this thing and it zaps the weeds with a laser. It makes all the cells explode. And so that, there's a future that we can now see the light at the end of the tunnel there. But right now, if you ban glyphosate outright, it would put out of business 80% of our farmers.
Got it. Wow, so we're kind of dependent upon something that we know makes us sick.
Yeah, we are. And, we're doing a lot of work in the HHS to look for other alternatives and to find find an off-ramp because the farmers don't want to be using chemicals anyway. They're very expensive. They know, they have some of the highest cancer rates of any profession. And farmers care about their land. They want to leave it for their kids. It also destroys the microbiome in the soil, and that causes erosion. And so it's not a good long-term solution. The issue is how do you transition off of it without putting farmers out of business?
Right.
Yeah, here's that laser.
Oh, wow, that's unbelievable. Laser weeding robot kills 100,000 weeds per hour.
Yeah, and it also kills insects. You can program it to kill, certain insects. But that machine probably costs $1 million. So,
but if you could have a couple of those running at night through your farm, that'd be sick.
Yeah. It would.
Okay. So Derek, do you have any comments on that idea of the laser? My immediate reaction is that's not going to be healthy for the soil. If it's killing the plants and the bugs, it's going to kill the microbiome in the soil. So I just wanted to get your thoughts about that. Had you seen that gizmo before? Had you seen that laser AI pest killer before?
That's the first I've heard about it. They're always coming up with something new, some kind of gimmick, but they're all Band-Aids. I mean, because the cycle is broken. And every time like you spray an insecticide or something like that to kill a negative insect, you're going to kill a whole bunch of beneficial insects as well. So you've got to figure out how to fix the broken system. And I don't necessarily disagree with the fact that the farmers are addicted to it. It's because it's easy. It's the way that they've been taught, and it's going to be hard to change. And they're going to have to relearn some older techniques and break the cycle that they're in and maybe do a little bit more work in certain areas to be able to fix it. But I mean, if you can just go spray something or, turn on a laser to go out there and kill all your bad bugs, there's going to be some that are going to take it because it's easy. If it works, we'll see.
Okay. To me, it just seemed like frequencies, and that the frequencies probably, I think most of our food is irradiated theoretically to kill pests. And a lot of people try to buy, for example, spices that say that they haven't been irradiated. So to me, I thought about that when I saw that, like all of these things would be irradiated. And then this is Dr. Joseph Ladapo, who's the Surgeon General of Florida, and he had some things to say about the use of glyphosate, which are diametrically opposed to what RFK Jr. was saying. So hopefully this one will play.
And of all the things that we found in the bread, the most concerning, as the First Lady was saying, is glyphosate, and it's otherwise known as Roundup. It's been in the news a lot with some of the court cases and that kind of thing. But I think that for many people, the court cases have mostly centered on cancer and cancer risk, and the company that manufactures it, they paid out, I think, billions of dollars in settlements. But ultimately, like, what is this? What does its presence mean for us as Floridians and for us as parents and families? And the evidence overall is just really, really concerning. I mean, this is something that basically doesn't seem to have a safe level of exposure. Now, I want to tell you that scientifically, that's what the research is saying. So 80% of Americans have it in their urine. People are chronically exposed to it because it's in so many foods. It's in so many things that use grains, that use corn, that use beans, that use soybeans, that use I think I mentioned corn and wheat. And people are chronically exposed to it.
Okay, Jason's saying I didn't click the audio when I shared the screen. So the idea here.
Yeah, Karen, real quick, just to help out here. Sometimes if you don't click the share audio, it'll come through your microphone. So out of your computer speaker into your microphone. And I think that's what's happening here. So maybe if you drop the screen and pull it back up and try that. So
I'm doing it right now.
Yeah. StreamYard's goofy like that, folks. Sorry about that.
It says I'm using the audio though.
Okay. Well, we'll give it a go. Sometimes it's just weird,
Yeah. Okay. Let me try it again. All right. We'll try Dr. Joseph Ladapo again. Sorry about this.
And, of all the things that we found in the bread, the most concerning, as the First Lady was saying, is glyphosate. And, it's otherwise known as Roundup. It's been in the news a lot with some of the court cases and that kind of thing. But I think that for many people, the court cases have mostly centered on cancer and cancer risk. And the company that manufactures it, they paid out, I think, billions of dollars in settlements. But ultimately, like, what is this? What does its presence mean for us as Floridians and for us as parents and families? And the evidence overall is just really, really concerning. I mean, this is something that basically doesn't seem to have a safe level of exposure. And I want to tell you that scientifically, that's what the research is saying. So 80% of Americans have it in their urine. People are chronically exposed to it because it's in so many foods. It's in so many things that use grains, that use corn, that use beans, that use soybeans, that use I think I mentioned corn and wheat. And people are chronically exposed to it. So when it's been studied, what has generally been found is that, it has a lot of really insidious effects, very concerning effects. So one of the things over these last few decades, we've been hearing more about the gut microbiome and how important that is. Like all these billions and billions of bacteria that live in our gut that somehow have this symbiosis with our body in terms of helping our immune system function properly, affecting our mood, affecting our energy, affecting our sleep. And one of the insidious things about glyphosate is that it adversely affects, in a meaningful way, our gut microbiome. So that's a major effect that it has.
Karen, you got to unmute.
Okay. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. Hopefully that worked that time. I thought that was a great clip from Dr. Latipo, or Surgeon General Latipo, and people have been kind of wishing that he would be in the running for Surgeon General. Instead, we have Casey Means, who has some nefarious connections and is also justifying the glyphosate use as RFK Jr. is. So I'm curious about your comments on this, Derek, and then we'll move to Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, over the last couple of years, it's become the industry standard to speed up harvest. All your small grains are sprayed with Roundup to kill them because combines and equipment have got so expensive. A lot of places out west that are raising these grains don't own the combines. So they're hiring in these custom harvest crews and they're on a timetable. So if your moisture window is not right when you harvest, it's going to mold in the bin, create mycotoxins and all that other stuff. So they'll go in and they'll spray it down. That way these these harvest companies can come in and just start on one side of the plains, harvest all the way across to the other. And, it just speeds everything up. So when you're doing that, there's no time for the plant to work any of the toxins or anything through before it gets put into the food system. So they're spraying it, coming back 7 to 10 days later, if even that long, harvesting it, storing it, or taking it straight to the mills, and then it's going right into the food system. And that's why so many people are tested positive for it in their urine.
I know a lot of people think that, for example, grains, some of the quote unquote organic, for example, I buy organic black beans. Well, probably those black beans have had glyphosate on them before they were harvested. Or I know that a lot of the lentils and legumes am I correct? Is that done to desiccate grains before harvest, or beans, legumes?
I'm not 100% sure on the beans and the legumes and stuff. I wouldn't doubt it because the way that they're already doing it with the small grains, it's been a standard for years and years and years in the cotton industry. Like I have a friend from college and stuff that lives in East Missouri, kind of around Poplar Bluff area or whatever. And I mean, you're lucky if you make it to 70 there. There's just so much cancer. They couldn't have a garden at home because they would fly the crop dusters and spray the defoliant on the cotton fields before harvest and would spray people's homes and different stuff like that. And it's not just Roundup. It's not just the other desiccants and defoliants. I mean, like David Knight talks about the dicamba, that's been around for 30 years. It's just a very highly volatile chemical. 2,4-D is the same way. When I was in college, whenever they would plant the tobacco on the farm, the 2,4-D had to go up until harvest because that can volatilize and travel over a mile, and it only kills broadleaf weeds. So it would definitely harm their tobacco crop and stuff like that, even spraying it on the complete opposite side of a 500+ acre farm.
I live in an agricultural area too, in the Central Valley of California, and there are a lot of people that have Parkinson's disease, and that's been associated with the use of paraquat in the agricultural areas. And as a kid, you're right. When we lived in there were crop dusters that were spraying right over our house, and I don't know what they were spraying, but those things have an effect on us, of course. So Ashley, I'd like to get some feedback from you. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And we did have a question from Deb in the chat, which Derek replied back to her, but I think that this is a really interesting question and important. So she had said, can you ask Bronk if they have used apple cider vinegar to clean the soil? And Derek did reply back, but I was hoping that we could get that out for the audience. And the other thing that I wanted to ask Derek to do is expound a little bit on, so you ended up going to working at the place that you're working. They made this big transition. So can you walk us through, what does it look like to revive and replenish and detoxify the soil and the land if you wanted to move in that direction?
Yeah, so I'll do Deb's question first. So the apple cider vinegar, we get raw apple cider vinegar in 265 gallon totes. And then we offer it free choice to our cows. So depending on the time of year, it depends on how much we offer. So like right now, they're getting about 2 ounces per head per day. And over time, we've been doing it. It'll be 2 years this June that we've been doing that. But so what we'll do is we just pour the apple cider vinegar in a tub that's within 75 feet of where the water trough is for the cows. So as they're out grazing and come to get water, or vice versa, you know, coming from water to go graze, they can stop and get a drink of the apple cider vinegar. And that helps balance rumen pH. It helps with internal parasites. It helps with all the same benefits that you could possibly, that you read that it could do for people. It's doing it for the cows too. And you know, when we first started, a lot of people were like, "Oh, you're going to have to dilute it with water. They're not going to drink it." And one of the groups, there were 125 cows with their calves and everything in it, and we put out 3 different tubs. So we knew like we were going to offer, you know, 2 ounces per head per day for the cows, and we just kind of split it between those tubs. Well, they all came running, just kind of curious, and flipped them over and spilled some of it. And, you know, it took a little bit of time for the new to kind of wear off of it and then calm down, but no problem at all with just the straight vinegar. They'll come drink it. So.
And really quick before you get into answering the rest of the question about kind of reviving that soil to feel comfortable to use it again, where do you source your apple cider vinegar from? Do you feel like that is, you know, because we have questions, we've heard about Appeal, we've heard about, you know, Bragg's being bought out, we've heard about all of these other interferences with brands that were previously known to be organic and healthy. So is there some amount of you just having to say, like, we just have to do the best that we can? Or do you have a supplier that you feel very comfortable with where you get your ACV from?
Yeah, we deal with a place out of Nebraska, and they only make apple cider vinegar out of their apples. It's not a byproduct of anything else. These apples are grown and harvested specifically to make this vinegar. We don't get their organic version. We get their non-labeled or whatever, just because of the cost difference on it, the volume that we go through and everything. I would love to, but at this point right now, we have to stick with their not labeled organic. And I've talked to the guys. You know, it's not like they just can't say, "Hey, this is certified." It could be treated certified. Or maybe you had one section, like with the organic stuff, like if you've got an orchard and you have a tree that gets sick or gets a parasite load or something on it, bugs coming in and eating it, and you treat that one tree, it's going to knock out trees in a circle of a certain distance around them. I think it's a minimum of 85 feet. So even though those trees didn't get sprayed, the other trees around them are no longer going to be considered organic because they don't have that buffer zone anymore. And that's kind of what they said, that the majority of their non-labeled organic is coming from those buffered trees. Does that kind of answer?
It does answer. And one quick question too, they're asking in the chat if you could share the link or the information of this place, if they could potentially buy, like, do they do individual sales or is it more of the mass farm sales?
I'll see if I can find that information real quick. I can't remember the company's name. It's on my phone, which I'm doing this streaming from, but and I can't remember. They're kind of a bulk distributor that they deal with, and how they do it, because large commercial accounts and stuff like that. But I can check. They might do gallon jugs. I know that they do. I'm trying to remember because I looked at so many different companies when I was picking this one out. But I know that they do the big totes and they do 55-gallon drums. And then there's another one that's smaller that they for sure do. But I'll try to look. It's a small company, a smaller company out of Nebraska. But I originally found them through Holistic Veterinary Supply that's based out of Pennsylvania. And I ended up going directly to the company instead, because what they were doing is They were shipping it from Nebraska to Pennsylvania and then Pennsylvania to me. And I just cut the middleman out instead of paying double the shipping on it. And I have them deliver straight to me. So.
Wow, that's
Okay.
amazing.
Oh,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Ash.
sorry. Real quick, I was just gonna say, if we can't get the link because you're using your phone right now, we can always share that next week, share it online. And I'll specifically tag Deb, who was asking about that. So no worries on that. And then before you get back, Karen, I was hoping Derek could walk us through that sort of regeneration process.
Absolutely.
And then I'll leave it there.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily advise everybody doing exactly what we did here or what was done here, because it's a shock to the system. So especially, I mean, the guy that managed this farm was a very good farm manager, and in terms of like ag and production and different stuff like that, he was pushing the limits. He had been in Progressive Farmer 2 or 3 times because of the stuff that he was doing, intercropping, where he would have like a strip of soybeans and a strip of corn and a strip of hay and different stuff like that would be harvested at different times. So you didn't have these big, vast, open, empty fields and all that, and working with fallowing and, following a lot of the university stuff that they teach farmers, which is not always correct. And a lot of it is like, oh, if you do this, you can get some grant money or different things like that. Like I've been to so many ag meetings that it's just, here's a list of all the different things that you can do to get some government money, and some of it's valid. Like if you've got guys that are feeding cows in a floodplain and they don't have any kind of erosion control, that's a valid use, in my opinion, of that, versus like crop subsidies to make sure that we can produce enough number 2 dent corn to feed all the cattle that are in the feedlots and out west and everything, and all the chickens and pigs and whatnot. None of that stuff goes to feed people. Like you can't eat number 2 dent corn. There's nothing there. But you have to kind of take it slower, and you have to restart all those different ecosystem processes that you've either turned off by using the fertilizers or the chemicals and all that, and then you have to get the life back in. And one of the main goals with this particular operation was the biodynamics. So biodynamics, just like briefly, created in 1927, Rudolf Steiner, anthroposophical creator. I forgot exactly how to say that.
Anthroposophy, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So after World War II or World War One, Europe got a lot of the first hybridized seeds, commercial fertilizers, where they took those munitions plants and started making fertilizer, because there's not a whole lot of difference. You're just changing the ratios and stuff like that. So, by the mid 1920s, they were already seeing disease issues, pest issues, loss of fertility, loss of yields, and all this stuff that was supposed to be improving their operations. And he was well known for his philosophy and the different things on stuff. So they were asking his opinion. So all of biodynamics is in a book that's from 7 days worth of speeches that he gave in 1927, shortly before he died. And he said, here's the foundation, go and build upon it. And so the cow is the center of biodynamic farming because of the gut microbiome and what they can do to the soil with their hooves and the way that they graze and the way that they can take what we do, like with our minerals. They'll eat our mineral, and then they can only use about 20% of what they consume. The other 80% comes out in their manure, and that helps to remineralize the soil and balance everything back out on the farm. So another thing that we do is we make compost teas, or essentially they call them preparations. There's a handful of different ones. It's a specialized composting process that they go through depending on what they are. And then they're mixed with water, and then we spray them out on the field, either a soil application or a foliar application, or they're mixed into the compost that we make here. So like, because of the cow and their stomach and their connection to the world around them, they're kind of the foundation of that. And the other part is creating a thriving, I guess, self-sustaining type operation. So you want to limit the number of inputs coming in from outside. Like your fertilizers or different things like that. You want to make your own. And the best way to do it is by running grazing animals over the farm to be able to do that. Because once you start running, like we don't use any insecticides on our cattle or anything like that, because we've worked over time. We've weaned them off of all that stuff. We've restarted their biological system so that they can start fighting the different parasites and the different, against the flies. And yeah, our mineral program and the apple cider vinegar and all that stuff helps. But because we're not using chemicals, we have insects that eat the pest insects. We have stuff that will break that internal parasite cycle. We have birds, just huge flocks of birds that, it looks like the herds in Africa where, you'll go out and check cows and there'll be a cow with two sitting on the bridge of two birds on the bridge of her nose, eating the flies out of her eyes, and a couple on their backs and everything. It's a working system. And then that's what you can see above the ground. And then the rest of it is, when you get into keeping the soil covered and restarting that mineral cycle, that water cycle, and all that stuff. And it just makes a huge change. But it's something that you can do in smaller steps, or you rip the Band-Aid off and go cold turkey. I mean, you're going to definitely have some pest issues, some weed issues and different stuff like that. But if you have patience and work through it, it's definitely beneficial.
So in the long run, do you find it's more cost efficient to wean off all those things because everything works in harmony?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, if I was running an operation to where I had to, number one, make sure that I had enough money to cover my fertilizer bill to be able to grow the hay or grow the pasture and all that. Well, why do you need to fertilize your grass? Maybe you just need to move your cows more often or rotate them, or maybe you have too many cows. Maybe you're pushing your land too hard. And it's hard to say, well, I have to sell X number of calves to be able to pay my bills. Well, if you dropped your number of cows by 10 or 15, maybe you could have enough pasture that you didn't have to buy that fertilizer, or you didn't have to buy in that hay from the neighbor or whatever. And then that ties into a whole nother thing that is hay. Hay is taking nutrients constantly. And if you're not running livestock or putting some kind of fertility on it, eventually you're going to deplete what's in that soil, and you're going to have more disease, more pests, more weeds, and stuff like that.
Okay. We talked a little bit on the phone yesterday. We talked about some of the things, the detriment that glyphosate does to the soil. Would you talk about that a little bit? And people have been mentioning how important the gut microbiome is. You talked about how key that is with cows, and I would imagine other ruminants too. So the microbiome in the soil and the gut, it's crucial. It's like the bottom level of that we build everything on. Cycle of life from the smallest organisms, of course, and if those are out of balance, then you've got some issues. So would you talk a little bit about what chemicals or glyphosate in particular does to the soil, that way, to the microbiome of the soil or of the animals and the plants?
Yeah, so like with ruminants, everybody's, well, they're grazers, they eat grass, they get their nutrients from the grass that they eat, and it's not exactly right. So they have different microbes in their rumen. So they'll go out and they'll eat whatever, whether it's a grain-fed cow, grass-fed, whatever. They'll switch over the microbes in their stomach to be able to digest that efficiently. So they'll eat it, and then the rumen is like a giant fermentation vat. So everything kind of ferments in there, and then the microbes break that stuff down and it moves through. But really, they're finding that a lot of the nutrients from the cows are actually from digesting those microbes that are moving on through the system and everything, as well as the stuff that they've broken down into smaller, more digestible and absorbable portions. So the way that I understand glyphosate was that it was originally a chelator that was used as an industrial cleaner for like pipes and different stuff like that. So if anybody's got hard water or very high mineral deposits and stuff like that in their water, that's what they would use this glyphosate as a chelator to gather all that stuff out and pull it out of the pipe so that they didn't get clogs and different stuff like that. And they realized that it killed all the grass where they were flushing the system out. So they decided to try it out and see if they could just use it as an herbicide to kill grass that in places that they didn't want it. And then you move on through the system and they developed crops that were resistant to it and different stuff like that. And that's, part of your genetically modified. And then you get into your biotech, where those are actually chimeras, where they put animal cells in the corn so that the corn root borer bites the corn and thinks that it's biting another root borer, so it stops, which is a completely different conversation. But
wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. So then by the time I was getting ready to graduate college, I remember seeing some stuff come out about this new product from Monsanto that they had noticed that there's a lot of micronutrients and different things like that that are tied up in the soil that have been treated with the Roundup. So the Roundup was acting as a chelator and gathering and binding these micronutrients in the soil so it wasn't available to the plants. So they had created this thing that you could go on and spray in between crops or as like a post-emergence kind of thing. Like once you sprayed with Roundup, wait a little bit, make sure all your weeds are dead, and then you can spray this to release everything. And I just remember I was like, well, that's like when you see the Ask Your Doctor commercials, and it's like you're taking this medicine to offset this other thing, and then they're going to give you another medicine to offset the negative effects of that medicine. And it's just putting the hamster on the wheel, and you're never going to be able to break free from that system. I mean, you can run Roundup Ready corn and not use Roundup. It's just an option that you have if you run it. Whereas if you run conventional corn and you try to use Roundup, you're going to kill everything. So it's not necessary. Like you can break that system and you can break that cycle, but it's not just what you see above the ground. You've got to learn everything that's going on underneath the soil and get that back alive too. And there's just, I think, I want to say it's 1,000 different beneficial insects that you will kill if you spray an insecticide to kill one negative. And then now you've just started that snowball running down the hill. What are these other ones? And the negatives always come back faster than the beneficials. So you just get stuck in that cycle. And I think that's what RFK was talking about when he's saying that they're addicted to it, they're stuck to it or whatever. And it's going to take a paradigm shift and a change. And a lot of the people in the regenerative ag industries and everything, they got put into a position to where their back was up against the wall. They were going to lose their farm or try something new. And they were forced into trying that new thing. And it turned out that it worked way better. And they made more money because they were spending less money. Then they had healthier products. And it just, started the beneficial snowball.
I think that isn't it manganese that's an issue with the soil with glyphosate. I think that there's a manganese causes a manganese deficiency in the soil. But
one of the main things that they've noticed, at least with like if you were to test, and I know we've got a nutrient density test on our grass-fed beef. They haven't sent me the printout yet. I've only seen a couple little things little blurbs that they've talked about on it. But one of the things.
We lost Bronx Stomper.
Karen, do you have another clip that you want to play while we try to give him a minute?
I just had those two clips. I could play RFK Jr. again since we'll be able to hear him now.
Yeah, we can try that. Let's do that and just give us a second while we try to get Derek back.
Okay. I have to find it again. You know what? Maybe I'll
I
just.
would like to pop in just for a second. I
Okay.
know I'm
And I was
backstage.
going to say,
we got him.
I
We got him.
I
Am
could
I
talk
back?
about glyphosate myself. Okay, go ahead, Derek.
Okay, I'll pop back out. Oh, Derek's gone again.
Derek's gone again.
No, I wanted to field this question, and I put it in the chat. Number one, the gut biome thing is very important because we've talked with Dr. LaGuardia on multiple occasions, and he pretty much drives everything down to inflammation and gut problems, right? And the glyphosate issue is huge with the gut, and that translates also to where Derek's wheelhouse is with livestock, because they're eating that. And the question I had for him was, I know that a lot of the stuff they spray the glyphosate on is for food stock, which then will affect the gut of the food we're going to eat, number one. And number two, how much of it is for ethanol? Because I could see them saying this is just for ethanol, this particular corn, because they add ethanol to our fuel at different times of the year. They have different blends or whatever. But that could wind up, number one, in our food, and number two, in our water. So,
and the air.
And
we
the
end
air.
up
Yeah.
breathing it.
That was the questions I had, and I dropped them in the chat. I don't know if Ashley or anybody saw them, but yeah, the gut thing is something to really talk about. And then, what they could make the excuse that we're not spraying your food with this, we're spraying X, Y, and Z, crop to feed the cows or crop to make ethanol. But does that even matter? Because, as you said, Karen, water and air. So, and I'll jump back out now.
Okay. And Derek, I have a response if you drop out again, but go right ahead. Did you hear Jason's question?
No, I didn't hear the whole thing.
He's asking, he's saying how much of glyphosate or how much of the food crops are being for livestock are being sprayed with glyphosate? How much is being sprayed with ethanol, or how much is being sprayed on crops that would make ethanol? And then we were talking about how even though the glyphosate may be used on food crops or crops for ethanol, it's still going to end up in the water, the soil, the air.
Yeah, well, one of the number one things that are fed to livestock is dry distiller's grain, which is a byproduct of making ethanol. So it's a lot. I mean, like a lot of that corn that ends up being raised, that's Roundup ready or sprayed or whatever, it just gets taken to the granary and sold. They don't necessarily pre-contract all that stuff out. It's smarter to do that. You can kind of lock in a price ahead of time in case the market falls on its face. But so a lot of it just gets hauled to granaries, and some guys have grain bins, so they'll hold on to it so that they can sell it, because obviously the price is going to drop right at harvest time because everybody's hauling it straight down. But then once it hits that granary, they're the ones that negotiate where it goes. It's going to depend on the need for whatever industry. If your poultry industry needs some more feed, then they're going to sell it to them. They'll grind it up, put it in there. It'll go to ethanol. Then that byproduct is then brought back into the food system and everything else as livestock feed, because it's a lot cheaper. I mean, we did a bunch of different research trials when I was in college on feeding it different ways and all that, because there was an ethanol plant about an hour from where the university was. So I mean, but when you look at like your garden corn, your sweet corn and stuff like that, there's not a lot of that is able to be sprayed by Roundup. Like they just kill it. Especially if you're dealing with heirloom varieties and stuff like that. And on the major, like the grocery store side, if they're selling it in there, if they've got a product that they've had to put the work into with cover crops and weed control and different stuff like that and not spray it with Roundup, they're going to say it's non-GMO. So there's not very many non-GMO crops that can stand the glyphosate. treatment. Now that doesn't mean that it wasn't sprayed with paraquat or gramoxone or something like that as a pre-planting burn down. But then you would have to do tissue samples to find out like if it had enough time to go through, depending on exactly what you were using and different. They all move through the plant in different ways, different time frames. They last different amounts of time. Like I told you on the phone yesterday, Agent Orange, it's still on the market. It's labeled as gramoxone, and it's a 3-day residual, is what they say, 3 to 5 days or whatever. So it's like an instant burn down. We used it one time when I was in college because we had electric fences, and we got behind on getting our fences cleaned up. So the voltage was dropping way down. So they gave us a jug of this and we put it in a sprayer in the back of a side-by-side, and we drove around and sprayed all the fence lines on a Friday. When we came in on Monday, it looked like somebody came through and weed eated all those fences during the weekend because it burned it down, and then that grass just blew away in the wind over the weekend. I mean, it's nasty.
Wow, that's amazing. Deb wanted to know if you learned at all about the Antarctic seed vaults or about seed vaults when you were in college or now.
I mean, I've heard a little bit about the seed vaults. I mean, like we always, for our garden, and then like we have a guy that runs a market garden here that it's not certified organic, but it could be if he wanted to go through the extra paperwork and all that stuff. Because of the farm that we're on, like he's not allowed to use any of the chemicals that he would use that would make him not organic, and he doesn't want to. But we all store our seed in the freezer. So, I mean,
that's
there's
interesting.
one in Greenland too, I think.
Yeah. And I've heard rumors that Bill Gates has control of the seed vaults. I don't know if that's true or not at this point. Sure, Jason, you can pop in if you'd like to. I was just going to mention, if you're interested, let me finish my point first, Jason, okay? That Stephanie Seneff, who I think is to me, she's the foremost expert on glyphosate as far as having studied it in the lab and its effects on the microbiome. And it's glyphosate or Roundup has surfactants which allow it to move through the cells of our body. It allows it to permeate the blood-brain barrier. So you've got glyphosate, it opens up the blood-brain barrier, and then things like aluminum can go into the brain. So she really feels that it's highly connected with autism and with so many other things, with all kinds of cancers and things. Stephanie Seneff just did a new interview with The Last American Vagabond, and Ryan has been covering the glyphosate really well with a lot of studies on his website. There's a study that shows that aluminum and glyphosate together destroy the brain, and that's something that Stephanie Seneff talks about. And there's glyphosate that's been found in vaccines, and we know that aluminum's used as an adjuvant in most vaccines. So there's glyphosate in vaccines. There's glyphosate in, I believe, every California wine has had glyphosate found in it. There's different organizations like Moms Across America that test foods and have found glyphosate in just almost everything. So it's everywhere now. It seems to be ubiquitous. And then with this immunity, it seems like it'll be even harder to find food that doesn't have that. And the history of glyphosate, the United States has kind of bullied, or Monsanto has bullied other countries into accepting our food or using it. Is that true, Derek?
Yeah. I mean, like there's the whole story about, they went into India and they told all these Indian farmers like, hey, look, this is going to increase your yields, and you're not going to have to work as hard to control parasites and weeds and different stuff like that. And then they found out that it completely changed the system. They no longer allowed them to save seed because Monsanto owns the patent of that seed. I mean, they have people on their payroll that go around and will steal samples out of your field, take it and test it. And if it tests positive and they don't have a record that you bought it, they're going to sue you for patent infringement. But that stuff can travel through the air. It's open pollinated stuff. So if you've got a guy down the road that's raising GMO and you're raising an older, like an heirloom type corn, it can blow over and cross pollinate with yours, and it's going to test positive. There's a guy in Indiana that fought him, because he had bought seed from a local granary to plant instead of buying it from the big companies. He was trying to support local ag. And they came by and tested him. He's like, hey, you've got Roundup Ready corn. Prove to us that you didn't save your own seed that actually belongs to us and everything. He was guilty from the beginning. He had to prove his innocence in it. And I never really heard how that ended up, but I mean, he was fighting back, and I mean, it was going to break him, but he wasn't going to roll over and take it.
Okay, thanks. Jason, go ahead. I know you had
Yeah.
something to say.
No, that's a great great point, Derek. And I've heard of those same things as well, because I grew up in Southern Illinois before I went off to the big city, and we had issues like that where, and this was back in the days when they were testing stuff, and if they tested it, and then you have this, what everything used to be organic back then, right? They would find it in their soil, and they would wipe that entire farm out. You're, like you said, you're guilty until proven innocent. But my question is, and I'll start with a story. When I was in Colorado Springs, I think it was Peterson Air Force Base or something. They had this big foam pit where they would practice putting out fires with this foam, and it like seeped into the ground, like their pit, it leaked into the ground, and there was a PLA or PCB or whatever the chemical was, got into the groundwater. So there was a major alert. They tried to bury it. They tried to cover it up. It was a humongous story. You could look it up. Just look up Colorado Springs around 2016, 2017 timeframe. It's a humongous story. But going back to the growing, and this is the question I have as well as tagged on there, there was a small time organic growing area. These people had, they grew organic stuff to sell at the farmer's market or whatever. And because the water was contaminated, they were no longer certified organic. And you talked about the word certified, the extra paperwork you go through to become certified organic, to be able to sell at this marketplace where they were selling at a premium because people want healthy food. They didn't even really prove that the food was poisoned or anything. It was their certification was lost because there was potentially a problem in the groundwater. They ended up, all their food, it didn't go to waste. They ended up making like some kind of a feedstock out of it, or dog food or whatever out of it, but it was a much, much lower price, and they wound up going out of business. And even if they didn't, I don't know, and maybe you can answer me this, especially with the topic today, where you're talking about getting away from that and regenerating and restoring the soil, if you can. How long would it take before a company like that could become recertified as organic? And
4 years.
4 years? Okay, that was one, kind of my question. But anyway, I'll drop out again. I know I'm supposed to be a fly on the wall today, Karen, but yeah.
No, you're welcome anytime. That was a great question. I was wondering about zoning. I saw a story about backyard chickens, or the number of chickens that are hens and roosters that people are allowed to have. And I believe this is in Kentucky, and there's a county that's going to limit the number of hens allowed on a residential property, except the definition of a residential property could be up to something that's 4 acres or 10 acres if it just has one home on it. Are you finding issues with zoning and the ability to do the type of farming that you would prefer to do? Or are people starting to see issues with that?
Real quick, I just decided to walk out here. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Coming through clear.
All right. That's the company that we get our vinegar from.
Okay. Can you zoom in a little bit more on that, Derek? Wicks.
It is Wicks Livestock Nutrition, LLC. And they're in Atkinson, Nebraska.
Okay. Cool.
So, so every different area is going to have slightly different rules. So like every county is going to have a planning and zoning board. So in Kentucky anyway. So that planning and zoning board can make rules and regulations for that area. Like we're very fortunate that a lot of the guys on our planning and zoning board are former farmers. So they do a really good job kind of helping take care of us. but we also have the ability to create an ag district. So there's already state laws in Kentucky that protect agriculture, but it doesn't mean that you can't have your neighbor sell their farm to become a subdivision and then them start causing problems for you. But if you're in an ag district, that gives you an extra set of protections and like limited liability and different things like that. So like with us, we had a neighbor that complained about our cows. And he called animal control on me and everything, and animal control came out and looked at it, and he's like, yeah, everything's fine, you know, like you're not doing anything wrong, you're a beef farm and you have cows. And you know, he just didn't like the fact that he could see/smell the cows for 3 days over a weekend. And you know, the animal control was out on Monday, and he's like, I don't know what he's talking about, like it doesn't smell, you know. But little things like that, you know, it's definitely going to be, it would be a lot easier to get rid of like a confinement pig operation, you know, if a subdivision came in next to them and stuff like that. But we've got rules with like pre-existing things and stuff like that. And then when you get into like the smaller township type things or subdivisions with HOAs and all that, like I know a lot of places that you're not allowed to have chickens, or if you have chickens, you're not allowed to have a rooster and different stuff like that. And it kind of falls into like some noise ordinance type stuff, but I haven't heard anything new coming out lately, at least in my part of the state.
Okay, Ashley's frozen, so she's having to restart her computer. Wow.
Oh no.
We're having the tech issues today. Well, yesterday on the phone, we talked a little bit about vaccines and whether they do serve a purpose, the conditions of the animals where vaccines may be helpful. So would you like to go into that a little bit? However you'd like to approach the topic.
Yeah. So with us, we give 2 vaccines to our cows. So one of them is the Clostridial parapharynges blackleg shot, and it's a 7-way vaccine. And those are all soil-borne illnesses that we know we have on this farm. And the other one is tetanus, because of the way that we castrate our bull calves. They're going to be prone to getting tetanus. And we proved that. We lost one in 2014 that didn't get a tetanus shot. And that's kind of, so when I started here, we didn't have enough cows to produce enough calves to be able to finish to fulfill our market demand. So we were buying calves in from other producers that met the guidelines that we had established. You know, they hadn't been pumped full of all kinds of crap. They weren't getting grain finished, or they weren't being fed grain and different things like that. They were being managed on pasture and in a similar way to ours. But even with that, because you've got different farms, you've got different things that they could be exposed to. Like we would always do it private treaty instead of going through a sale barn. And then anytime you run anything through a sale barn, like there's the increased risk that they could get sick and whatnot. But like when we were doing that, we were giving an extra vaccine that was for like IBR, which is infectious bovine rhinotracheotis, BVD, which is bovine viral diarrhea. There's 2 types of that. One, like they're a carrier. They never actually express it themselves, but they spread it through their manure.
Do you think those are bacterial?
That's what they say, you know.
Okay.
But the other main one that's on there is called PI3, parainfluenza 3, which is commonly called shipping fever. And what that is the stress of being worked through a corral, loaded on a trailer, shipped somewhere else, new place, new set of cows, everything else. The cows get sick. So, and typically what that is, at least the case that we had here, and I'll explain that in a second, but it was a gut bacteria that got into the respiratory tract and colonized there. And it couldn't be in check, fever spiked. It was clear mucus, but I mean, it was thick, just thick mucus pouring out of their nose and stuff like that. So we actually had 30 that we had to pull out of our group of finishers that they had to be treated with antibiotics and anti-inflammatory, and run through a different market, because everything that we sell here is antibiotic, hormone free, and all that stuff. So because we had to pull those out and treat them, we ended up going through a different market with those. And all we did is we had them on one side. This place is split in half by a highway. We had them on one side, walked them up into the barn, put them on trailers, hauled them over to the other side. It was less than a mile. And then we had a kind of a spike in temperatures, and then it dropped and got real rainy. And we went out there and there was one dead overnight. And then we noticed a couple of them with that thick mucus. So we immediately took the one that died, hour and 15 minutes to a veterinary diagnostic lab. They did a necropsy on it. I had a vet out that afternoon, and we were over there 3 times a day. Anybody that started dropping their head, their eyes started getting glassy, ears fell forward, different stuff like that, like physical signs that they weren't feeling good or starting to get sick, we'd pull them out of that big group and bring them over, and put them in a different field and watch them take temperatures, and then worked with the local vet to see what we could do. And it took 10 days to get the results back from the VDL. And by the time that was done, I think we lost 3, and we had 30 or 31 that we treated. And it was a single dose antibiotic that had a 20-day withhold period, and then essentially like an injectable ibuprofen, Banamine.
Wow, that's amazing. I have a couple questions in the chat. Jason says, does Derek research to see if the few vaccines he does have to have have moved into the mRNA model?
I've done a lot of research on that. And actually, one of the original vaccines that we were using, we found out that it had thimerosal in it.
Ooh,
and
wow.
we got rid of that one. Because there's 29 states in the United States that don't allow thimerosal in human vaccines, but they're allowed in animal vaccines across the country. So I was on the phone with every single veterinary supply company that I could get a hold of. I called all of them. That, like, if you get on the websites where you can order your vaccine, different stuff like that, I went through every single manufacturer. I called them. I talked to them about it. They put their research doctors on the phones with me. I was honestly surprised with how well the communication was with them. And we found one that had a different binder in it. It's like they're saying that the thimerosal is a preservative or whatever that they're using. So we found one that's different, and
which has mercury in it. That's right. What the danger is with thimerosal.
I can't remember what the preservative is in the one that we use, but so back to what I was originally talking about, when we were buying cattle in, we'd give the other vaccines just to help as like a just in case kind of thing. And it was always a goal to wean off of that system. So when we stopped buying cattle in to finish, we started cutting vaccines, and we went vaccine free. I think it was 4 years. And then in the fall, a lot of times we get what we call an Indian summer. It's really hot, dry. And when the cattle are walking and grazing, just when they step, the dust plumes up. And we lost 2 to blackleg in a week. And the value of one of those could have paid for that blackleg vaccine for the entire herd for like 4 years. So
do you think explain blackleg to me? I've never heard of it.
Yeah, so blackleg is a bacteria that lives in the soil. The cows ingest it, and then it goes through the stomach, through the intestines and stuff like that. And it I forgot what the technical term is for it, but it attacks muscle cells. It can attack, it's called blackleg because it tends to go to the leg muscles, but it can attack anything. We've seen it in hearts. The one that we lost, it was in her cheek muscle. So, we move our cows every single day. So we drive around while we're out there looking at them, making sure everybody's looks good, nothing's changed, nothing's weird, and we notice this lump on her jaw. And it could have been an abscess. She could have bit her cheek. She could have got kicked, whatever. So we got her up, ran her up into the barn, and was doing a couple different tests to try to see what was going on. And I was like, well, we'll just have to wait and see what happens, because I can't tell exactly what this is right now. And she was dead by the end of the day. So what we did is, once you start seeing that muscle swell, what happens is it traps anaerobic blood in that muscle. So it's so deoxygenated and blue that it looks black. And I talked to the vet, told him what was going on, and he said, get you a scalpel and cut that cheek open. And it was black. And then it smelled like rancid butter. And he said, yep, that's definitely blackleg. Like, that's the two like things that you can look and smell and see, and be able to figure that out.
So it sounds like a flesh-eating type of sort of, you hear about the flesh-eating bacteria. It sounds like it's causing necrosis.
Yeah, it messes with the blood flow, and it'll attack like a muscle group. So like it attacked her cheek muscle there, and it just, the blood would come in, but it couldn't come out. And that's what was causing the swelling, was that deoxygenated blood just kept building in there. And then I've looked at it. It's been a while since, we were going through all this. I looked at it and did a little bit more research into it, but I've forgotten some of the details on all of it. And that's the thing with like the vaccines that we're using. There's some places that are still doing them where they're taking plasma from other animals and creating those, old school, like original vaccines out of that. They're a little bit more, but they're an option.
Okay. I have another question here. I want to get to some of these questions. Ronnie Omelets asks, is the U.S. subject to the cow's nodular skin disease scare that caused mass cullings by the government in the EU?
LSD, lumpy skin disease.
Yes, we talked about that, I think.
Yeah. So if you look up lumpy skin disease, it's not fatal. It is a huge detriment to the meat market and to the hide market. So what it does is it causes these little lumps that kind of abscess all over the cow and different stuff like that, similar to what the screwworm does. But the screwworm actually eats them from the inside out, whereas this just causes a lump that'll open up and it ruins the hide. So you have these pock marks all over your hide, so you can't have pretty leather. And then on the meat side, that's adding additional cost because you have to cut each one of those out in the processing process. But as long as you can use penicillin to cure that disease. Like, there was no reason for them to go in and euthanize that dairy herd. Treat the ones that are sick with penicillin, get them over it. Now they've got immunity to this, and all that milk would have to be used for animal consumption. You can't use it for people now because they've been treated with penicillin. I think it's 16 to 28 days, something like that. So it's a huge economic burden, the having to dump milk or, feed it to bottle calves or whatever. And then those hides are going to be worth a lot less on down the line, but that's not nearly as bad as euthanizing a 200 cow dairy, is what happened in France when all the protesters came out. They hit them with tear gas and everything else. And that was completely unnecessary to me. It's kind of like with the avian influenza deal. Like, I don't understand why you would euthanize flocks for a disease when that disease doesn't have 100% mortality. Mm-hmm. Let the disease run its course, even if they're broilers. Okay, well, they're not broilers now. They're now seed stock because they're immune. They have natural immunity to this that they're going to pass on for generations. But no, let's not.
Okay, Ashley has a question. We've got more questions in the chat, and I know Jason's been putting questions in the chat also. So go for it, Ashley.
Yeah, well, one thing was just a comment. Unless you have an interest in destroying the food supply for people, that would be a great reason for murdering an entire flock, for millions of chickens or an entire herd of dairy cattle, whatever that would be. So there's certainly that for us to consider, and I think everybody here does. So we know that the reason that these heavy-handed measures are being taken is not because it's in the common or the best interest of the people. It's because it's the opposite of that. And, we see that with them going after people's ability to have raw milk, like we've talked about many times. There are so many other health issues that they could focus on, but they decide to tell you that you can't have raw milk. So my question, though, Derek, is getting back to the decisions that you have made as far as vaccinating, not vaccinating. What does your veterinary care look like? As far as, does the farm have a team of vets that they trust and talk to? And are these vets people that are on the same page as you, or at the very least they respect what you're trying to do as far as minimizing medical or pharmaceutical intervention with your cattle?
Let me ask on tail on that, with what are you seeing changes in veterinary care as veterinarians are being corporatized and consolidated? Is it getting harder to find a vet? Go right ahead.
Short answer, yes. There is a huge lack of large animal veterinarians. The closest large animal vet to me is 45 minutes away. It's $100 just to have them show up. Anything else that they do on top of that is an extra cost. So I actually, when I went to college, I started as a pre-vet major. So after 2 years worth of doing that, I'd only drawn blood off of some horses, and we watched my boss at the university farm work cows, which if I hadn't been in that class, I would have been helping him do it. I learned way more from him, dealing with livestock and doing, our own veterinary medicine. So I do a lot of it. Now, when I run into something, I don't know what it is, I'll reach out, especially there's one vet clinic that I talk to that they deal with a lot of like stalker type operations where they're constantly bringing cattle in and out. So they get exposed to a lot of the new thing that's running around or whatever. There is another vet that I work with that he is also raising grass-fed and finished beef and direct marketing it. Him and his wife, we actually went to the same university before he went to vet school and everything. So yes, I have a lot of people that are kind of on the same page that I can talk to, bounce ideas off of and stuff like that. Now, as far as they're going to go to veterinary medicine a lot of times because of their training faster than they would go to like a holistic tincture or something along those lines. So I have to do my own research on that side. There was a podcast, I cannot remember the lady's name, but that was on there, and she actually makes and sells these like first aid tincture kits or whatever for cows. And then you can work with her and create a whole holistic plant-based medicine routine for your livestock and everything. I think she's out of Montana. But she started doing it on her own, and then realized, had neighbors calling, and it's like, hey, can you make me this? And kind of turned into a business for her.
That's awesome. Ashley, I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Or you were. Are you there? Nope. She has no sound now.
Oh, no.
Okay, I have a question from Spirit of the Age, who is Paul. Derek, what is your opinion of ivermectin use on livestock?
Ivermectin is a Band-Aid for bad grazing practices and crappy genetics.
Wow.
So we know for sure that ivermectin will kill dung beetles. That's been proven. That's part of the reason why we don't have a lot of dung beetles in cow country, because they're all getting treated with ivermectin or something along those lines, whether they need it or not. And they're finding that it's not only affecting the dung beetles, it's affecting a lot of the other soil life as well. Sheep and goats are a lot harder to get off of dewormers than cattle are. You can do cattle pretty quick, but sheep and goats, like our sheep, we specifically sought use from a herd that had never been vaccinated and never been dewormed. And they came out of Southwest Missouri. We brought them over here, 25 ewes. We lost 4 the first year. And that's kind of what it takes. It takes letting nature kind of sort out the genetics that aren't gonna match. Now with the cattle, what we do is if something looks like it's got internal parasites, like it needs to be dewormed, we'll do it. But so that dewormer goes through their system and into the soil. So they get dewormed right before they get on the trailer on their way off this place. I do not let them shed that here. But I'm also not going to let a cow die for no reason either. So, and it's actually like in the organic standards, like there's a ton of stuff that is listed that's not allowed. It's, you know, it's a violation of the OMRI standards. And if they find out that you're specifically not treating an animal to not violate those standards, they'll pull your certification.
Would that be under the name of like abusive practices? Is that why they would do that? Okay.
Yep.
And really quickly, I was trying to chime in earlier and having internet issues apparently, but I was going to say, when you were talking about the woman who started the business about the naturopathy or the natural ways to treat the cattle, I think that's amazing. And that's really ideal, what a lot of us would want to be able to have for our own pets.
Yeah.
But as a second place, it's good for you. I'm glad to hear that you have these people who are practicing, who understand what you're trying to do. So at the very least, even if they don't offer the more natural suggestion, at least they respect what you're trying to do as far as minimal intervention from medication and or vaccines, which is huge. And that, I think a lot of us struggle with that in real life. You know, it's something that Karen and I have talked about as far as treating our own animals. We would love to be able to treat them without having to go through the big pharma of conventional veterinary medicine. So anyway, thanks for answering that question. It's interesting to hear from you, Derek, in what you do, and as far as trying to find the best way to care for your cattle and to care for their health, but also the humans that are having that meat later on.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like the older veterinarians are definitely more open to it. It's like they're not as indoctrinated coming out of vet school as a lot of the younger ones are. And then it takes the younger ones kind of seeing it. Like we had one of the vet clinics that we originally used, the vet that owned and ran that clinic when I started here, he was roommates with a vet that I worked with on the other side of the state where I grew up. I actually worked for him for a while and different stuff like that. So he kind of knew that I had some experience and I wasn't just kind of pulling stuff out of thin air. And that definitely helped open that door. And he would always joke about our Rainbow Coalition because we have so many different breeds of cows that we have, because we're trying to create a breed that functions really well here in this environment and is doing what we want soil wise, but then also produces a good meat product in the end. So, I mean, at one point, I think we had 10 different breeds that we had on this place. So, and it's, you know, varying different sizes and all that, mature frame score and stuff, but it's always fun to kind of play around with that. And then just to see the difference in some of the younger ones, like what they're getting taught. And it's, you know, it's where the funding's coming from. You know, like one of the great things about where I went to college, the head of the animal science department, if somebody wanted us to do a study, like for somebody's thesis or whatever, they would make them sign documentation ahead of time that if it turned out negative for the company, they couldn't make us bury that. And there's so many big ag universities that will bury a game-changing study because the company that funded it doesn't like the results. And Dr. Davis would not have it because he was a cattleman and he was trying to do things and experiments and all that that could help make him a better cattleman and make his side job, his side hustle is what he really wanted to be doing, more profitable. And that's the whole animal science department was that way. They all owned their own cows and were running their own business outside of school.
That's fantastic. You know, we hear, well, for instance, RFK Jr. talked before he became ran for politics or for office, whatever. He talked a lot about science being bought and paid for, and how we see that with the vaccines and so many other things. I'm sure cancer drugs, a lot of health studies, science is bought and paid for. If you don't produce the results that are desired, you're not going to get your grant. You're not going to have your lab. You're not going to be peer reviewed. You're not going to be put in the journals. The editors of the medical journals have come out and said we're no longer unbiased, that we're bought and paid for. That the science that we publish is biased, and that sounds to me like what you were describing there. And I feel that way too about doctors. If they're an older one, I feel a lot more confident that they've got some thinking skills, some critical thinking skills, and that they look at things more as problem solving and possibly take some initiative in figuring out a problem and seeing it as a challenge rather than just using an algorithm to treat something. You know, not being so formulaic.
Really quick, anecdotally, I have a friend who she believed that the microchip that her dog had been injected with, based on where it had migrated, was causing seizures for her dog. And it was several vets that she consulted, but it was an older farm doctor that was who actually ended up helping her and remove the chip from the dog. And so just to add a little credence to what you're saying, Derek, as far as like who it is a little bit more open-minded to working with you and to help you, get to your goals, whatever that may be.
Yeah. And like I said, the guy that, he's doing the direct marketing and grass finishing himself, he's obviously, looking outside of that system. So even though he's only a couple years older than me, he's one of the few younger vets that are open to it and whatnot. And like a part of the reason why a lot of people don't like the homeopathic medicine is it's not a one and done. Like you have the average age of a cow calf producer. So a guy that he has cows, they have calves, he sells the calves. That's how he makes his money. They're 65 years old. That's the average age in the United States. And it's a lot harder for them to pull a calf or a cow out of the herd, bring them in, run them through the corral 2-3 times a day for 3 to 7 days to give them that treatment. Whereas you could look at all the cattle magazines and they sell dart guns, so you can just load up your antibiotics in there and drive out on a side by side and dart them and then go on. The needle falls out, you pick it up and you go on. It's like it's an ease thing, and it's different out west because you've got the communities that work together. They'll do sharing, like working, branding, and all that stuff. They'll just go from farm to farm to farm, and it's a big deal in the spring and the fall. Whereas, east of the Mississippi, you've got generally an older population with just a handful of cows. They're not even managing on the level of putting their bulls in for a certain amount of time and then taking them out. So they're calving year round. And it's just different management levels. If you've got a crop operation that you're doing on the side, or you're so worried about making sure that you get your hay put up, you're like, well, I don't have time to move cows, or I don't have time to do this. And, when honestly you could make less work for yourself if you just spent a little bit more time with your cows and didn't worry so much about getting that hay put up, graze that hay field, give your other pastures more of a rest. And then maybe you don't have to feed that hay come winter because you've got grass that they can graze. And maybe you just have to give them a little bit of a protein supplement because the protein levels dropped in the grass through the winter. Like there's a lot of different ways that you can do it.
Okay, I've got another question in the chat, and I know there's several in that Jason put several in the chat. You want to handle those in a minute, Ashley? Would that be okay?
Yeah,
And then
yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I'll read this one here in the chat. I'm just moving down the chat, but there are quite a few questions. This is from Dakota Feather. Question: I buy my cat's raw meat sliders from Small Batch Brand, which is at the top of the truthaboutpetfood.com list. So this is a link they provided. What questions should I ask them about their ranchers using mRNA jabs? So this would be for cat sliders, raw meat that they buy.
As of right now, there are no mRNA cattle vaccines on the market. As of now. So as long as it's a beef product, you're not having to worry about that. But one thing that, the liver and organ meat and all that is very popular, not only to help with the human diet, but also in pet feeds. So you need to know what they're treating their cows with, what their cows are eating. Because if they're just feeding their cows grain and it's getting sprayed with all kinds of chemicals and fertilizers and everything else, the liver's the filter. It's pulling that stuff out of their system. And now you're feeding all that garbage that this cow has pulled out of its system to your pet. So knowing where you're getting it is definitely a bit more important necessarily than like what's on the label and stuff like that. There's every community that I've ever been in, there's somebody there that's raising beef. You can find, so like on the processing side, the slaughterhouse side, there's custom and then USDA. So, and some of those are in the same building, but custom is like, so if I own the cow, I can take it, process it, and it's not certified by the USDA. They don't have to jump through all the hoops for them. It's stamped not for sale. I can give it away. I could pre-sell it. Like I could have, a neighbor down the road that's like, hey, I'd like to have a half a beef, so half of that's theirs. They can determine the cuts that they want out of it, and it goes straight to them. They know where they're getting it and all that. But then also, like if you're looking for pet food and stuff like that, a lot of that stuff gets thrown away if they don't have a market for it. It go like the place that we use. It goes to a place that makes fertilizer. It's a rendering plant. They render it down and make fertilizer out of the bones and any of the organs that are not used and different stuff like that. So you can get online and look up, custom processing facilities and stuff like that and make some phone calls. And if they don't have something that they can sell you, I guarantee they can tell you who's in the area that's direct marketing beef, farmers markets and all that stuff.
Karen, I think you may be frozen now. Can you hear? You there?
Now I've got everybody. Yeah, I can, but everything went the little swirlies for a minute. But am I back now?
Yeah, you're back.
No?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Deb wanted. I can hear you, but you're frozen now. But I can hear you. Now I can't hear you. Okay, I may have to leave and come back.
Okay.
I got you.
Can you hear us now?
Wait. Yes, I can. I can hear both of you now. Are we okay?
I think we're good.
Okay. So Deb wanted to know, what are cattle pens cleaned with?
It depends. So you can use all kinds of different things, but depending on the certifications that you might have, would dictate on what you can and can't use. So like for us, we've got a barn to where like when we run the cows through the chute and all that stuff, it's bedded down with straw. It's got a lime base in it, and then it's bedded down with straw, and we take and strip that out once a year at least, if not more often than that, and that goes into our compost. And then we rebed it down. If we have anything that we know is sick and comes in and goes in the barn, we might strip that pen individually and then spray down the panels and stuff like that before we rebed it with various different things. I mean, like Novacin is one of them that you can use, and chlorhexidine is one that you can use. I mean, you could make your own bleach water, just different things. I mean, there's a ton of different stuff that you can use.
Okay.
Conventionally, though, like the big pens, they're going to use whatever's the fastest and the cheapest chemical that's on the market to just nuke those pens to make sure that nothing could possibly carry over to the next group.
So that may very well not be the best way to go about things.
It might not be.
Ashley, yeah, Ashley, we've got several questions in the chat, don't we? I got the ones in the Rumble chat.
That is what I have seen. Let's see. We did have another question from Dakota Feather as far as the poultry. She said, or they say, I stay away from liver products due to it being a toxic organ. I heard that livestock is mRNA jabbed at the slaughterhouses. I thought there was another question maybe in there, but other than that, I think we're caught up on questions. I could be wrong.
Okay, and then were there questions in the group chat backstage?
If there are any more, then I do not see them. I think we're caught up.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. So
all right.
One of the things, I hear a lot
go
on different podcasts and different stuff like that about people talking about, the beef has to be done this way, or it has to have this vaccine, or, it all gets mixed together, and that's kind of a combination of a lot of different things. So like we take our beef to a USDA inspected facility because we sell to restaurants and we sell through our on-farm store and we ship to people in a regional area and different stuff like that. So it has to be certified. So really the only difference between the custom local slaughterhouse and the USDA slaughterhouse is the regulations of having a USDA inspector on site while the cattle are being killed and then while the meat is being butchered to make sure that they're following the rules. And then it gets all the way down to like arbitrary things of the difference of a 4-inch drain every 12 feet versus a 6-inch drain every 8 feet and different stuff like that. So it's added cost, which makes it harder for somebody to open up a smaller local place. So then you get pushed into these big facilities like the one that Tyson owns that they're closing in Nebraska or whatever, that employs this entire town. They're shipping to a different location. They might run 2,500 to 5,000 head a day through one of those facilities, whereas like the place that we're using, their busiest day is maybe 22, and they only do that once a week. They're only butchering animals or processing animals once a week. Like there's a place like 2 hours from me that they have the contract for the Whole Foods for the Southeast region and a bunch of different stuff like that. There's a company out of North Carolina that's shipping semi-loads of cattle to them to get processed that then they're distributing out to other places, but they're still under 100 head a day kind of thing. But so there's nothing, any kind of vaccines or anything like that. That's all the guy that's raising the cows' prerogative. And he can choose whatever he wants unless he is a custom grower for a big corporation or whatever, which is what they're trying to do with cattle. They've already got it with chickens and turkeys and ducks and pigs and all that stuff. And they're trying to do it with cattle. I mean, Tyson started some of the first ones that I knew about in Northwest Arkansas in the 1990s. They were just paying guys to background cattle that then they would then send to their feedlots and then to their processing facilities and stuff like that.
Derek, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Can you expound a little bit on that for people that may not understand? So me living in the South, and this may be everywhere, but if you're out on a rural country road, there's a good chance that you're driving past a stinky chicken house that has a tiny little Tyson sign, but maybe not everybody understands what does that look like for a farmer to kind of own his chicken houses or whatever that may be and kind of be responsible for the chickens and yet beholden to the giant corporations.
I know it very well because my dad works for Pilgrim's Pride. So, so the farm owner, that he owns the land, he gets into a contract with his company. They lay out the specs for the building, depending on what it is, whether it's breeders, broilers, pullets, whatever. And then they're on a contract. So they have to buy the chicks. They get paid gains if they're broilers. They get paid based off of egg production. They have a service tech that has to come around and check on it and all that stuff. And then they're rated based upon their performance in all the flocks that are coming through, like in that quarter or like out of that run. They might break it down smaller than a quarter. It just kind of depends on the place. So, I mean, like they don't really get to make any decisions on what happens with those chickens. They own the building, and if they've got a contract renewal or something like that, or try to switch companies, then they might have to go through and do $50,000 worth of renovations for new technology that this new company wants and different stuff like that. Or they've got $1 million chicken house sitting there that is worthless. I mean, it can be a very rough system for sure. The service techs are going through, they're looking at stuff, they're pulling birds out, doing the cropsies on them, trying to manage flock health and everything. But there's a set of triggers that are set, like what we were talking about with the bird flu. Like they would go through when it was really big, they would catch like a dozen chickens per house, and they would do a necropsy on them. They would take fat and blood samples. They would all be mixed together, sent to a lab, run through. If that popped positive on a PCR test with who knows how many cycles, then they would go back, they would collect another group of chickens, test them. And these aren't sick chickens that they're doing the test on. They're just grabbing a chicken out of there that's running around. And then if that second set of tests come back positive, they euthanize the entire farm. Not just the house that's sick. Like it could be a 2-house farm all the way up to like a 16-house farm. It's probably one of the biggest chicken houses that I've seen. And there's anywhere from 20 to 30,000 birds in each one of those houses. And if they get one barn that tests positive, the entire farm is euthanized, whether they got sick birds in them or not. And that's what screwed up the egg deal. So back in 2012, 2014, the avian flu that went through then, that was mostly hitting the broiler houses, according to the news. But then the last one that went through, that was the laying houses, the ones that were producing eggs and whatnot. So it's weird that it would only affect one set of birds,
Yes, it
depending
is.
on what the market's doing,
Yeah.
even though you're going to have a broiler service tech and a breeder service tech and pull it, like they're not crossing houses or whatever, or different sides of that industry. They're staying all in that same class, but they're sharing office space and different stuff like that. I mean, there's no way that you can have one company that has broiler farms that are getting avian influenza, that these guys have weekly meetings together and everything, that there's no way, if it's as bad as what they say, that it's not jumping. I mean, it's all a game to play with the markets.
Exactly. And that's what before I hand it back over to Karen, I just wanted to say that's exactly it. So if people wonder how these agencies can have so much influence over our food, this is how, because you have corporatization and you have centralization. So when you have the power of chicken houses or egg houses or whatever you want to say, of people that are essentially beholden to the corporation, even though it's their own land, that corporation runs the show. So there are backdoor deals, I'm sure, that we don't know about. There's government regulation. There's all kinds of things that factor into the behavior of the big meat companies And if they decide that, like what Bronk is saying, that the market needs a correction or that prices need to go up or whatever, this is a way that manipulation can happen. I'm not saying I fully understand everything, but when you understand that the person who owns chicken houses in your area is working for a big corporation and they do not have say, and if their entire flock has to go, it has to go. And that's going to be, they don't have a say in that. So this is just one tiny example of the regulatory capture that is honestly permeating everything. And Karen and I have talked about this, our medical, our healthcare, our groceries, everything. And this is just a tiny little drop in the bucket of how that manipulation can happen.
Right. I live in California, and of course, it's a huge agricultural area. I grew up, worked in a Del Monte peach cannery. There's Sunmade Raisins is here, and Victor Davis Hansen lives 5 miles from where my parents lived, and he talks about growing up on a farm and 200 or 300 years ago that's been passed down, and all the manipulations, the government regulations, being allowed to grow things or not grow things, the price of the raisins being fixed in so many ways, allotments of water. It's a huge political game with the water. There's plenty of water in California. We've just been declared drought free for the first time in 25 years. Yet those whole 25 years, huge amounts of water have run back into the ocean every year from the snow runoff. So all of the whole food system, the whole medical system, we've talked about like this, like you've said, Ashley, so many times, it's all manipulated and it's all being consolidated and corporatized. And Jason and I covered some of those high intensity pork barns and the chicken facilities that you're talking about and how toxic they are to the environment. You want to talk a little bit about how concentrating animals like that, it causes health issues and also environmental issues possibly, and then about something maybe about pork and the way it's being shipped overseas and then shipped back, and beef and the labeling with beef as can we trust the labeling we see in the store to know where our food is coming from? How's that for a question?
Yeah. So I know a guy that I call him a hybrid farmer because he does a little bit of conventional, some biodynamic and some organic and all that stuff all mixed together. And he sells about 5,000 pigs a year to JBS Swift that's under an alternative label that they have because they're all antibiotic and hormone free pork that they're selling and everything. So he uses the biodynamic compost preparations in his barns. He pumps out that manure from those barns. It goes through a further process to break it down. And then he'll take that and spread that on his crop fields that his goal is to be able to raise 80% of the corn and soybeans and everything else that he feeds to those pigs himself. So he's trying to, limit his outside inputs and produce as much as he can. And I think I talked about this on the Doc Rock deal, but the first time I ever went there, I was within 100 feet of his farrowing house, and they were completely quiet. I couldn't smell them. I thought they were empty because using the compost preps, it kind of keeps, what he's found is it keeps the solids and the liquids from separating in the pits, and it doesn't go anaerobic and it doesn't stink. And then when he puts it in his lagoons to kind of break down further, he uses the forced air, like hydroponics oxygenators to churn that around. And I've never seen hog manure that's purple, and it's purple because of the phosphorus content that's in it. And then he'll pump that out and just spray that on his fields, which is a completely different process than taking a Tyson house that doesn't have anything else done to it. You've got any antibiotics or dewormers or anything like that that's getting mixed into that manure. They're pumping it out, and they look like septic trucks that they pump them out in, and then they've got sprayers on the back. So they'll go straight from there, go somewhere else and spray it. And a lot of times the negative effects of that is over application. They'll apply too much of it because they've got to get rid of it. And then you get a big rain and it runs down, it gets in the creeks, and then you've got problems. And that's like one of the big things a couple years ago was that like 2019, the red algae bloom that was killing all the dogs and different stuff like that. From my understanding, one of the main causes of the red algae bloom is where they're taking the human waste from our water treatment facilities, turning that into fertilizer to go back on crop fields. It's washing into the creeks and causing that red algae. And what was the other part of that question? I'm sure I didn't answer.
I was asking if you can trust the labeling to know where your meat's coming from in the store.
So like when they got rid of mandatory country of origin labeling, you could pretty much throw that out the window, which I know I really wanted to kind of get Guard to go into that when he was talking about it late last year. Because right now it's just as long as a percentage of the final product is done in the United States, they can call it a product of the United States. Like there's grass-fed and finished beef that's coming from Australia and New Zealand that they're raised there, they're killed there. They take the halves, put them on frozen, like refrigerator units, ship them over here. Then it's broke down into the individual cuts or ground for hamburger meat and sold as a product of the United States. And I don't understand how they're able to do it at a lower dollar value than what we're able to do it, doing it all here in a 45-minute circle. But they're undercutting us on that stuff. And then I kind of talked about it a little bit when I was on with Tiger, but everybody got upset about the Argentinian beef coming into the United States and everything earlier this year. And they've been doing that for decades. So because the United States sell or can produce such high quality meat on a grading scale, I'm not saying like nutritionally or anything like that, on a grading scale that they grade the meat at, they can get a premium for it as an export. So we're taking a lot of our premium beef, exporting it outside of the United States, and then to keep beef prices low in the grocery store, they're importing cheap beef from Central and South America. And a lot of it's just walking across the Mexican border. Like they'll literally just trail them up into the United States, and then they'll process them. And that's where your cheaper cuts of meat are coming from in the store here. And they don't have to label it. I mean, like you can have a cow that lives its entire life in Mexico and is in the United States for 48 hours before it ends up in a freezer, and it's labeled as a product of the United States. And that's where the mad cow disease, the BSE scare, they put some restrictions on some of that stuff when they were having BSE coming in out of Canada. The only 2 BSE positive animals that have ever been found in the United States going through a processing facility had come in from outside of the United States within 48 hours.
Wow.
And they're using that to try to put mandatory electronic identification tags in cattle that have a premises ID number so that they can track these cows from birth to the package. But they're not going to put that on the meat that they import. They're going to put it on us, and it's going to be the same thing like what they were doing in Europe. They're going to know exactly how many cows are in which area, and they can use whatever reason that they want to cause or to call for a culling of the herd. Was it Ireland? It was like 200,000 head they culled out of there or something ridiculous. And it's just them getting their the camel's nose under the tent flap. If they can start making it to where you've got to do that, and they'll do it surreptitiously. They'll make it to where you can't take your animals to the sale barn unless they have one of those EID tags, or you can't sell it to somebody that's going to process it unless it has that. The only way you would be able to do that is if it's 100% your operation where you're raising it, finishing it, having it butchered, and then selling it yourself. It would be the only way to, as of right now, that you would be able to get around a bunch of that.
And then they could also require various health interventions, different types of food. Yep. So it'd be kind of a health record that we are here talked about that may be attached to our digital ID. So it's kind of a social credit score for livestock in a way.
Yeah.
Okay. Since you were talking about beef from south of the border, you want to touch on the screwworm scare a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I dug into it a little bit more yesterday. There's not a lot of new information out there. It was really big 9 months ago, and then it kind of died down, maybe because of winter. But we know that the screw fly was a problem in the United States all the way up into, I think it was the 60s when they started releasing the sterile flies, something like that. And within 10 or 15 years, they had pushed it south of the United States down into Mexico, and then they continued that project, and they pushed it all the way down to Panama. So what they do is they have these sterile male flies that they raise in a lab, which who knows, I don't know how they were doing it. I mean, because they've been doing it since the 60s. It's not necessarily a new weird technology that they're using, but the screw fly females will only mate once in their life. So if they can mess that process up by having them think that they mated with a male, but it was actually a sterile male, it breaks that life cycle. And within a couple of generations, you've depleted it enough that they go on. And it's, I mean, they're kind of a nasty little thing. But I would say that a lot of that is because of broken ecosystem cycles. Like if you have a healthy ecosystem of birds and other like parasitic wasp and other insects, they're going to be able to knock that fly population down on its own without having us to necessarily intervene. You know, if you think back 1960s, that was really in the peak of them starting to build these massive feedlots and where they're shipping cattle, you know, and killing all the feed yards that used to be up in the Midwest and like Nebraska. You know, everything started moving to Kansas and Nebraska and all that, and where they were having less rainfall and less mud. So that could have been part of the problem that made the screwworm so bad, is that we started that big consolidation process. And you can track that back to World War II. You know, pre-World War II, you know, 90% of the beef that was consumed in the United States was grass-fed and finished. And they started grain finishing as part of the war effort. You know, they started paying, that's where a lot of the crop subsidies came from. They're like, we're going to pay you to raise corn and beans because we need that to feed these cows so that we can take and ship this beef over to all the GIs to keep morale up. You know, because those guys, you know, they were there from when they went in until it was over, for the most part. But they said that the average U.S. GI's beef consumption doubled while they were in service during World War II. And they used that as a way to keep morale up. Well, then they had a taste for it. They were used to it. They came back. And that's when we started getting a big shift into the grain finishing beef and walked down the grass finishing. Because you can take a cow from Kentucky or Missouri or whatever, and then put it in a feedlot and you feed it the same ration, same types of feed, and it's all finished to the same standard. Like that stuff doesn't, there's a reason why you have such a big seasoning industry, you know, because they produce this bland, like flavorless meat that's just generic because it's from all over the place. So it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't have the taste of where it came from. You know, so our cows are going to taste a certain way based off the grasses that they're eating the last 60 to 90 days before they're processed. You could go 100 miles in any direction and it's going to taste a little different because it's going to be a slightly different variety of grass that they're eating. So
that makes sense. The seasoning, that's the whole barbecue industry, the rubs, the tri-tip rubs, and wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's to cover up either, like what somebody told me, I don't know if it's true or not, like ketchup was kind of invented to help mask the taste of like the rancid meat and everything. Right. You know, and barbecue is the same way. Like not very far from me, Owensboro, Kentucky, they're famous for their mutton barbecue because nobody wanted to eat these old ewes that were out of production that were, you know, so they would take them and they would barbecue them, you know, and cover them up with all this sauce to mask that lanolin flavor that you get from an older ewe. So
that's interesting.
If I could just one quick thing, that reminded me of Napoleon Dynamite. Do you remember when he's drinking all? He's
One
drinking
of
all
my
the
favorite scenes ever is when he throws the steak and hits him in the face.
yes.
That's
So
what
it's a
I
great
think of.
movie, but he's part of the I don't the four I cannot think whatever, but he's drinking all these different milks and he identifies whatever the cow got into, he can actually taste that milk. So that's what it reminded me of, that we should be able to do that. We should have access to high quality food, and this is what has been stolen from us. And this
Yeah.
is like, thank God that Derek exists and people like him educating us, because it doesn't have to be this way and it shouldn't be that hard for them either. And then the last thing that excuse me, I wanted to chime in on about this is just that, like, the education that we're getting from Derek here is so important to us to try to hopefully make better decisions going forward as far as where we get our meat and the conversations that we can have advocating for ourselves.
Absolutely. I was my last question would be for you is, well, it's two things. Number one, what tips, or just a little tip that you would give to the average person who wants to eat a little better or try to support more natural food production? What can we look for? What can we do that's not too much work, or in certain organization that you think does good work, or a good way to find a farmer or a beef producer? And then the other one is there anything we should be wary of as far as what can we speak out about, or be on the lookout for, or push back against? So what's something positive we can do, and what's something we can look out for and possibly help with?
So one of the things that we're doing right now is we're working with, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Wendell Berry. He's like a farmer, philosopher kind of guy.
You mentioned him before.
Yeah, he's from like 45 minutes north of me. So there's the Berry Center there, and they're doing a lot to like teach the older ways of farming. You know, they have classes that you can take, like forestry classes, and they do a hog processing every single year that you can get in on. But what they're trying to do is help build regional agriculture back. So they've started this berry beef program, and it's a way to try to get cattle producers in this area out of the commodity market of, you know, taking their calves, weaning them and selling them at the sale barn, and you're at the whims of the market, you know, when you're doing that. And you know, over the last 50 years, we've kind of gone from, you know, 75 cents out of every dollar going back to the farmer to like 15 to 17 cents now. So they're trying to strengthen that, because we're losing our farms, we're losing our small farms, and it's all like get big or get out kind of mentality. And that's where a lot of our problems come from, and are going to continue to get worse, because the more of us there are, the harder it's going to be for them to make us do the things that we don't want to do and eat the crap that we don't want to eat. So we're working with them to try to help that operation get up. I think they have 10
that
different
name,
farms.
Wendell Berry? Could you spell that for us?
Oh
please?
Gosh.
Is it Berry?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just go ahead and continue with your conversation. I'll pull it up on my end, okay?
Great.
Okay.
That'd be awesome.
But yeah, something like that, where you're going to be able to find some different places. You go to the farmers market. Every county has an extension office that, yeah, they're backed by the state land grant university or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's all bad. So the farmers market, the extension office, that's where like all the 4-H activities and stuff run through, and whatnot. And then they have different clubs and all that you can get involved in if you want to. And it's a good way to meet other like-minded people, and learn more about the system that's going on there. But I mean, the easiest thing is a farmer's market. If you can find a farmer's market near you, there's not a good website to get on to like search for farms in your area. They've tried a couple of different ones to try to aggregate stuff. A lot of what you find out there are like the butcher box type deals, to where yeah, they have a set of standards, and they have cooperative producers that are raising that meat for them and stuff. But you're still dealing with a middleman kind of thing. And the more you can get away from that middleman and deal with the people that are doing it, the better off it's going to be. And you can learn. Like, we don't have all the certifications that we could have because it's extra paperwork. It's more different. You know, we have to spend more money to get all that, but we have an open door policy. Like, our farm is open because we have some agritourism stuff on the other side that we do from time to time. But you can contact us and do farm tours and ask us questions. And like, we're not hiding anything. We're an open book. Like, we filmed some stuff on yesterday for the Soil Carbon Cowboys thing. I was part of a Q&A that they had after a screening of the Roots So Deep documentary. So some of those clips they're starting to put some of that stuff together to start pushing out on YouTube, which that's a great organization to look at. Regenified is a certification company that is through the Soil Health Academy. So they're really big on like trying to help fix the broken mineral cycle, water cycle, nutrient cycle, and all that stuff. And they have a tiered system. So it's like 1 through 5, whereas organic is either you're in or you're out kind of thing. And then they help you, they consult with you, they want you to move forward. They have a website that you can get on there and find farms, anybody that's certified through Regenified on there. American Grass Fed Association, if you want grass fed and finished, that's a big distinction too. If it doesn't say grass fed and finished on the label, they could be grain finished. That's a little labeling trick. A Greener World is the parent company for the American Grass Fed Association. And they have a couple really good educational things for learning how to read through the BS that people put on labels, and to be able to break some of that stuff down. I'm trying to think.
Oh, that was a huge amount of information. All so very helpful. Fantastic. Yeah, I'm going to have to listen to this again 2 or 3 times because you've given us so much information. We have a question from Spirit of the Age. I've heard that it isn't feasible to feed the masses using organic farming techniques. What's your take?
It's something like 80% of the world is fed through subsistence farming, 20% through the corporate farming stuff. So, I mean, it might not be labeled organic, but you can guarantee subsistence farmers are not going out and buying all these chemicals and commercial fertilizers and stuff like that. And look at the African deal, like the holistic management and the basis for our grazing came out of that farming revolution there in Africa, of running multiple species. And then, like, because they have predators, a lot of times they have to corral their animals at night. Well, then you get this big concentration of manure. Well, then they'll come through and they'll plant their crops where their corrals were at night. So they're getting all their fertilizer from the animals. And then they've had to learn, like one of the pictures I saw, it was a guy that, they used this corral. So they had cows, goats, chickens, and pigs that would go through. So everything would get locked into a corral at night. And then the cows and the goats would go out and graze during the day, and the pigs and the chickens would scratch through all the manure and everything that was there. And then everybody would get locked up in a different spot. They might only use that corral for a day or 2 and then move on. And then they would come through and they'd plant corn or whatever they were going to grow there. And then to keep the elephants out of it, they would plant chili peppers around the outside of it. So the chili pepper plants that were the border was enough to keep the elephants from coming in and grazing their corn and everything. So like there's a way to do it, and it might not be labeled organic, but the most of the world is fed through that type of stuff, not through the big endless cornfields and chicken houses and everything else.
People are giving you great accolades in the chat. Skunk Hollow Rose Garden says you are the COTS Secretary of Agriculture. And Deb says you're the bomb. So are we about ready to wrap it up? Is there anything else you'd like to add? And we'll let Ashley ask another question or do what she'd like, and she can shout out the chat. So Derek, anything you'd like to add or discuss? And then Ashley also.
No, I mean, I could sit on here and talk about cows and grazing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Then
It's been fantastic.
forever,
Is there anywhere we
so.
can find you, or do you have a contact information, or and that's not required at all? Completely up to you.
I don't know. I don't actually have approval from my bosses to do a lot of this stuff, so I kind of feel
Okay.
weird.
That makes sense.
I don't want necessarily anything stupid that I say, and now that everybody knows me and my username over the last couple of months, if I say something stupid on the internet, I don't necessarily want it coming back on the place.
I know. I
understand
completely. Why did I use my actual name?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it is what it is. I knew by the time I got on Tiger's show, I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to hide it. So I just have to be better on the internet, bite my tongue sometimes. But
Okay. Somebody's asking about your hat. Is there anything special about your hat?
It's Rodeo King hat. I don't know, I've had it for a couple of years. I used to rodeo. It's actually how I paid for part of college. So
nice.
I was on a rodeo team.
And you live to tell about it. Cool.
I live in Clovis.
I live in Clovis, California, and we have a rodeo every year. And we do have a farmer's market right downtown. And so there's a lot of Western culture here and agricultural culture. So I want to thank, let's have Ashley do the shout outs and make her final comments, and then I will do that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Just thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today, Derek. And before I do shout out the chat, I wanted to ask you what our friend Wheezy, What is Truth, asked if you carried around a, what did he say, like a one-shot Derringer?
No, I carry something around that has more than one shot in it. So
there we go. Okay. Question answered. Thank you.
Okay.
Depending on the season, it might be bigger or smaller.
Yeah.
They got to protect our lambs. So
yes.
Yeah, I'm not trying to rush this out of here. So if you have some more questions, Ashley, that's fine.
Okay, good. So I actually did. Speaking of protecting your lambs, when we did the Doc Rockathon and you joined us, you had talked about some wise or responsible ways of managing the risks to your herd from coyotes and things like this. So could you give us a little bit more information on protecting your herd? Do you have the what are the dogs that are known to be so good that are protective of
Pyrenees.
Livestock? Pyrenees, yes, Great White Pyrenees. Talk to us a little bit about that if Karen has a few minutes and you do, Derek.
Sure.
Yeah, so when we first got our sheep, we had two guard dogs with them. One was a Pyrenees, and the other one was a Pyrenees, Maremma, and Anatolian Shepherd cross. Which the Maremma and Anatolian Shepherds, they fight wolves off from flocks over in Europe. They put these big, like, black metal looking spike collars on them and stuff to protect their throats from the wolves. But because we have so many houses and subdivisions around us where we're at, the Pyrenees will run up to a 7-mile circle around the flock at night. So they just got, we would provide them a self-feeding dog feeder with dry dog food. And then every other day they would get raw organ meat from our cows. And they still ran the neighborhoods looking around for scraps and treats and different stuff like that. And I just got tired of going down the road and picking dogs up and bringing them back and all that. So we got rid of them. We then moved the sheep in with the cows. And we were like, hey, this is a good place. They've got a barn they can get in at night. It's right by my house, by my office, and all that stuff. We can keep an eye on it. But what we didn't realize at the time is that was kind of a no man's land for the mature coyotes that we have here. So when we first got the sheep, they were inside of electro net fencing. So it looks like a net, like you see chickens sometimes in it on like pasture situations. It's similar, but a little different. So they were in that, and they were in the back of the farm where we have coyotes that look like German shepherds. And we didn't lose anything back there in that time frame. But then we moved them around some different places. And once we moved them to the barn, they were just in like the same polywire string stuff that we use with the cows. And they come up into the barn every single night. Well, the mature coyotes were smart enough. They would hunt wildlife and everything. They would leave our livestock alone. But where we put them is where all the juveniles would go. So you've got these young ones, they're getting kicked out of the den. They've got to find their own way and do their own thing. And they're going to eat whatever they can get a hold of. So they took out half of our lamb crop the first summer we had them over here. And I've actually got a picture because we couldn't figure out when they were coming in. We just come in the morning and there would be dead sheep out behind our barn. And so we put some trail cameras on the back of the barn, and I have a picture of 4 coyotes coming in. 3 went in the barn and grabbed a lamb, and another one was distracting the cows that were in the group with the sheep. And there's 3 of them that's dragging this lamb like out of the frame or whatever, while the other one was a distraction. And we had to end up, to get them to stop, we had to kill all 4 of those coyotes. We took 1 out, and then we took 2 out, and then the last one kept coming back and hunting by himself, and got rid of that one. And so what we realized is that the older coyotes know the game. They're not going to put their life at risk to get a lamb or get a calf, because they have plenty of turkeys and deer and everything else that they can eat. So they stay away. So if we only kill the coyotes that are in with the sheep, that solves the problem. And we've been fortunate, haven't had to do that lately. I think they've learned, like, okay, I can go wherever I want, but if I cross that fence where those sheep are at, I'm in trouble. And it's kind of stopped it. And that was kind of an inspiration, like I talked about on the Doc Rock marathon, came from a guy in South Africa that's using the same thing with the lions that live there on his place. And then I was told about a book, Don Coyote. The guy, coyotes were causing problems, killing livestock. He poisoned, trapped, shot, killed every coyote he could. Prairie dogs came in and started destroying the ecosystem of his farm. And it's kind of the story of this coyote that survived one of his traps. He ended up being a 3-legged male coyote, and the rancher and this coyote ended up forming a bond. And he realized how important he actually was to the ecosystem and all that stuff. It was an interesting book.
Very much so. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really interesting question about, as far as how to address this and how to try to do that responsibly. So I think that's very interesting that you made the distinction for us between an adolescent or a juvenile versus a mature coyote, and sort of the learning process that can be involved in them, but also how important they can be to the ecosystem for the land. This all very, very fascinating. And so I think that all of my questions have pretty much been answered. I can go ahead and actually, before I do that, Derek, do you have anything that you want to say, like final wrap up, and then I can get into the shout outs?
No, I guess actually I can give you, so it's not a work email. So my username, it's BroncStomper111 @hotmail.com. That's my email address. So if you got questions, anybody's got questions, I'm terrible at checking my email. I usually only do it like once a week, but if you got a question that I can answer, or maybe something I can send you to point you in the right direction, I'll try to do what I can. But yeah.
All right,
that's not a work email, so I can give that one out.
Cool. All right, you ready for me to run through this, Karen?
Yeah, I just want to point out, I have a link to Tiger Tales tonight at 8:30 Eastern, pinned to the top of the chat. Franco, Angry Tiger, does a DJ set, and we've been working together to try to get the request system smooth, so that there are less delays. We can get more requests in. So Saturday nights at 8:30, Angry Tiger's Den for 2.5 hours. We just listen to music and hang out and have a good time in the chat. And especially with what's going on in the world today, it's good to have a chance to get away from that. So I hope that you'll join us tonight at 8:30 Eastern in Rumble at Angry Tiger's Den for Tiger Tales. And I would like to say, I know we have other activities going on tonight. Doc Rock has a watch along with Wag the Dog, and then RB Ham's show is also tonight. So there are a lot of things that go on. Saturday Night Anarchy is also tonight. But hey, I'm working at Tiger Tales tonight, so I hope you'll join me. Go ahead, Ashley.
Okay, we are running through the list here. Now, once again, I think everyone knows that I don't like to take any personal responsibility. So if your name is not listed here, we're blaming Jason. Does that sound fair, Karen?
You can blame me if you want to. My brain was, I had war brain today.
No, Jason was the one that was keeping track, and he was being nice. I think he got everybody, but just in case, that's who we're blaming. Okay, so we had White Wolf, we had Casey Junior Barner or Junior Barnes. I'm sorry about that. Will Tabox, Narrow Way, Narrow Gate, Levi. We had LT Oracle of Truth, Geese Busters, Spirit of the Age, Big Ron, Ronnie Omelets, Karen R. Peterson, Name Lad 1234, Deb, Bride B. Mac, Sweets, Ann Christ, Providence Wins, Rocky USA 33, Skunk Hollow Rose Gardens, Doc Spoiler, and his movie is Wag the Dog if you're interested, Do Not Obey, Denver Attaway, Carl and Hanny, Wheezy from What is Truth, Doug Lug, Sherry M2, Ricky from Anything is Possible, Misfit 1904, Tom Cooper. We had Yona, Steven 94, Dakota Feather, Brandon Bennett, SMU Haskey, Sylvia 19, Franco, Angry Tiger joined us for a moment. We had Hiker Emoji and Conspiracy Reality. So a lot of people watching live today and participating in the chat. It was a lot of fun. Thank you, Jason, for keeping track of that for us.
And I'd like to say to Ann Christ, it's great to see her. And we are doing addiction or recovery specials again. We don't really have a calendar set out, but we do those on Angry Tiger's show on Wednesdays every so often. So when we do have another date set, I'll be sure to announce that. And please, it's really helpful if you remember to like and share, repost the video on Rumble. And Jason, would you like to share our website?
That's why I popped in. I'm glad you said
That's
that.
What I figured.
I do want to add one more shout out. Billy Ray Valentine popped in. Make sure you check out America Unplugged and then Gorilla Underground tomorrow night. And I will tell you, just go to our website. We were talking about Angry Tiger. We're talking about Billy. We're talking about Ricky. Anything is possible. All these folks that we listed off. Tom, I don't know if Tom's listed there. Tom, we'll have to get you added, man, if you're not. But go to the Knights of the Storm. Don't forget the. Otherwise, you're going to end up at the motorcycle club. That's okay. They're cool people. They do charity work. But anyway, thenightsofthestorm.com will take you there. Go to the Friends tab. Everything is up to date as I can get it right now. And we've actually added a couple new people. I would like to shout out Indie After Dark. That's a really good show. They do sometimes karaoke, sometimes live performances, then have a serious conversation. And then even after that, after the show, they drop the link in and they have like a backstage conversation. Really awesome program. Anyway, that's all I got, Karen. Great job, by the way.
Okay, thank you. I was in the chat thanking everybody for being here. Derek, I want to thank you so much. Derek Lawson has been our guest today. It's been such a pleasure to have you. And I just thank you for fighting the good fight and helping to spread the word. And it's just a pleasure to talk to you. I think we need to get you on Guard Goldsmith's show to talk about the issue that you wanted to talk about with him. I think you'd be a great mind meld guest So maybe I can put a little bug in his ear about that. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and those of you listening in the future, watching in the future. We appreciate all of you so much. Please try not to get too caught up in the news cycle of the day. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, guard your humanity, do those things that help build your spirit and your connection with God and with those around you. And with that, I will say, keep your sword sharp, keep your armor tight, and shine your light. Have a good week, everybody.
Bye-bye.